And he has found some 8,000-year-old pips that they're now trying to do some microsatellite sequencing on to see if they can figure out exactly what the species derivation was. So as I said, wine has been the primary driver for diversification of these cultivars. And then table grapes and raisins kind of came along as a sidelight, and they happen to be more and more important as we get into modern cultures. But this has not been primarily a food crop, it's been a beverage crop. You don't find too many products made out of grape flour. You could make it, but it's not going to happen. Wine has been a strange part of culture. Not only has it been a fermented beverage almost its entire domestic history, but it's been used as part of ceremonial culture for almost the whole time that it's been part of it. And as it spread from its origin into the Mediterranean cultures, and then out from there through the empires, they generally had it as a religious meaning as well as a practical aspect of the fact that, as we talked about with the having ships earlier and being able to keep beer and wine better than water, the alcohol was a natural disinfectant for water, and it used to be that water was diluted with wine, or vice versa, whichever way you want to look at it, to make something that was safer to drink. Now, once it spread out into the Greek Empire and into the Roman provinces of the Roman Empire, that's where most of the domestication has occurred from that point on. And eventually, the barrels that were used in that period replaced all the amphora that were earlier used, and they found out there was a much better way to deal with wine. The wild plants are mostly dioecious, and there are not too many of them left. Almost all of the grapes, with just a couple of cultivars exception, are hermaphroditic flowers or perfect flowers. And so this has been one of the results of this long but not too intense selection of cultivars. And the selection of cultivars has been mostly due to local adaptability for certain kinds of traits, be it slightly more cold tolerant, be it slightly higher in sugar content, etc. There hasn't been a big change during the history of domesticated grapes in the vinifera grapes. Now, what happened that drove a lot of interest in breeding grapes over the last 2 centuries was that the European people were very dependent upon the Vitis vinifera and all those cultivars. They had them all grown in just the right place, just the right terroir. Everything was nice and handy. And then somebody got greedy and decided to bring over North American plants. Because they noticed that in North America, they were much more cold hardy. And they said, hey, we could use that. Well, of course, as we talked about, they brought along a pest with them, which was the Phylloxera louse. And it caused a whole-scale devastation of the European vineyards because you had a very concentrated bottleneck of all one species there, and one pest would manage to destroy most of it in one very short period of time. Luckily, somebody was smart enough to realize the rescue could be accomplished from the same source. I have enough time to tell you a quick story. I visited the wine museum in Siena. The head there was very much a Francophile, and French wine was the only good wine made in the world, even though he was Italian. And he said the disaster that happened with the American grape plant people overnight. I said, wait a second, they brought the cure too. He refused to speak to me from that point on. Okay. But that was how the cure was performed, and for many years all of the French grape plants were put onto American rootstocks because they were resistant naturally to the Phylloxera louse. Just to give you an idea of what the world does in terms of dependency on the grape, about 1 out of every 100 jobs in the world is related to being a wine grower, that is, the person who grows the grapes, a winemaker, or a wine marketer. So 1% of you, 1 out of every 100 of you, is going to be involved in the wine business, whether you realize it or not. Okay? Just something to think about. About 1 out of every 130 acres cultivated is a vineyard. Now, Horst Gaspari, my viticulturist counterpart, will say, well, yeah, but it's a true acre of grapes, or is an acre of grapes that's planted 5 feet apart, 6 feet apart, 8 feet apart, etc. Which is true because he does the surveys, and people say, oh, I have 4 acres. Well, it may have 300 plants, and may have 800 plants. There's a difference. Wine societies, clubs, etc. I've met 3 winemakers right here in our panel already. Maybe all of them do, I don't know. And it seems to be sort of a sexy thing. I'm not sexy, but I like being in that world. And we've got a lot of words like vintage, vineyard, grape, wine, and all elicit positive emotional responses, which is kind of unusual. We tend to find that vineyards and winemaking are highly personal, even though there's a complete worldwide industry that is much more homogenous than that. People like to make wine, they like to do it their own way. I have a little evangelistic plug, which is that I think small agriculture is being driven right now in large part by the development of vineyards and wineries all across America. And I love that. So this is my plug for the fact that having a species that comes from a different place and development of it into a new area, even though it was traditionally here in another form, the wild grapes have been here for longer than in any other place we know of, probably. Or maybe back to Gondwana, who knows. But this is a nice way. We are taking a crop that's new to our culture and making a culture around the plant. The plant is becoming part of our culture. So that's sort of the story of wine in my nutshell, and I'll let you go with that. Thank you.
Was going to be by Cecil Stushon. Cecil unfortunately fell ill, and I found that out this morning, and I thought he was going to talk to us about one of my and our most favorite crops, that being potato. Yeah, Frank says that up there too. So Cecil is a Rutgers alumnus. I'm a Rutgers alumnus. I've worked with Cecil. I can't give his talk, but I thought rather than not talking about potato, I would take a crack at it as the moderator, kind of hop in there. So I'm going to make sure I set the timer so I play by all the same rules, and I'm sure I'm going to be quick. But let's talk about potato for a moment. Yum! This is the picture of potato. Now, the way I think we tend to think about it are our friends here. And why I decided that we didn't want to not have a short presentation on potatoes is just to make us aware of the new cultivars that are becoming available. And to make sure that when you go to the supermarket, you're looking around the potatoes and looking for changes to be occurring in what's available to you. So we've already heard Dr. Benzinger mention Peru is the home. This is Cecil's slide showing us the center of origin. I got to make sure that I understand domestication and origin, so I got to go back and do a little bit more reading, because this is important, I think, relative to developing crops like potato for their health benefits as well as all their other wonderful characteristics. And I thought it was cool. So if this is wrong, I take credit, and because I got this off Google, but I just looked these kind of cool facts. So this is where we start. Isn't it interesting? So we start here, and for potato to get ultimately here, it went to Europe, and you've already heard that part of the story. And ultimately, then the potato came back to North America. So that's one factoid. And have you been getting your 3 little factoids? I know what's on my list. So you already heard these stories. And, you know, maybe Dr. Benzinger knows that this one's really true, because I thought it was kind of cool. So you already heard about Francis Drake bringing the potato over. So there's one piece of at least folklore on Google that he gave it to a water Raleigh, planted it in the garden, didn't tell the cooks which end to eat, so they ate the wrong end, and you've already heard that the leaves are kind of